Thanks to Labor, Australia's now falling behind, as we know, in the global energy race. Now, Chris Bowen, Environment Minister, flew over there on the government jet, presumably. He was at COP29. He was at these talks this week. Now, our climate warrior rejected a nuclear energy pact with our AUKUS allies and 30 other countries. They all signed up. We said, no, not for us. It's been labelled an embarrassment. Joining me now is Shadow Environment Minister Jonathon Duniam. Jono, great to see you again. What's Chris Bowen know that the rest of us don't?
Well, I think he knows how to ideologically pursue green votes at the expense of good common sense policy. I think that's what he knows, Steve, and frankly, we're the ones who are going to be paying the price. I mean, talk about cutting your nose off to spite your face when it comes to having all tools at your disposal to do the right thing by the people you represent. Goes to COP, stands in the corner while everyone else gets about their business and signs up to good common sense policy, and we reject it for reasons that remain unknown to us. Spurious evidence, which is selective and incomplete around what they claim to be the costs of nuclear. And we will have more to say about what we believe to be the costs of nuclear in the near future. And I think your viewers will be very interested in the facts around the matter as opposed to what Labor are saying. All the while, our emissions are going up, so our climate warrior Chris Bowen has failed at his core task of bringing emissions down, and people are paying more than $1,000 on average per power bill than they were but when they came to government. So he's failing on all counts, and he's doing nothing about it except pursuing green votes at the expense of everyone's power bills.
Well, forgive the pun, but the embarrassment went nuclear because his counterpart from the UK, I think, Jono, Ed Miliband, actually had us signed up to this thing when he announced it and then had to withdraw that statement because Chris Bowen said, no, mate, we don't want to have anything to do with this.
It's a concern when an extremely left-wing UK government thought that perhaps the Australian Labor Party might be okay with this, and then learnt that perhaps even Albo and Bowen were further to the left on this issue and lacking any common sense at all. I reckon they were pretty surprised when that happened. But again, what an embarrassment. We are a developed nation, and we should be doing the best we can to drive down power prices, to attract investment so people do things like manufacture here and people can pay their power bills. Ed Miliband gets it. Keir Starmer seems to get it, but Anthony Albanese and Chris Bowen and the rest of the Green zealots in this government that are driving our economy to ruin just don't.
Well, I think, normal Australians, when they hear this, they go, well, hang on a minute. We've got a nuclear reactor at Lucas Heights, which does medical work. We've signed up to an agreement where we're going to service nuclear-powered submarines, and you had Anthony Albanese and Richard Marles in Perth launching that, saying, oh, well, we've just had a tour of one of these nuclear subs. They're fantastic. They're going to form the backbone of the defence of our country. You're going to have, presumably at some point, Jono, either in your harbour down in Hobart or in Sydney Harbour, one of these nuclear submarines parked there. What would signing that piece of paper, what difference would it actually have made?
Well, other than it would contradict their absolute ideological opposition to nuclear, because they've said, no, we're definitely not going to do it. It's off the table. We're not pursuing it for a range of spurious reasons that actually don't stand up to scrutiny. So they wanted to be at least consistent in their idiocy. But the fact is, as you say, look at AUKUS, look at what the subs actually tangibly mean. We are going to have members of our Navy sleeping next to, in effect, nuclear reactors for long periods of time, defending our maritime borders, and that's okay. And as you say, they'll be tying up at the harbour here in Hobart to resupply, and as they patrol around the country, other harbours in other major population centres, that's fine. But in terms of generating energy for domestic consumption and manufacturing, etc., no, somehow there is some ideological line you cannot cross, and it doesn't make sense. Even my kids get it, and they're not even out of high school yet. So I don't know what our Prime Minister and his Energy Minister and the entire Cabinet are doing other than driving us to ruin.
Still on green energy, Jono, we've got the leading energy expert, this is a guy, Matt Rennie, the government's renewable energy plan, he says could cost more than, wait for it, $600 billion as delays, plagued the path to net zero. I mean, that's a huge cost, but we still have Anthony Albanese and Chris Bowen and all of the rest of them saying, oh, nuclear's too expensive, we can't go down that track, it's no good.
Yeah, so this is exactly right. And so the Frontier Economics report, which revealed this additional $500 billion, $500 billion of expenditure associated with their transition to renewables, which isn't going to be paid for by the money tree down the bottom of the garden near the unicorn paddock. It is going to be paid for by the users of the electricity system in our country. You, your viewers, my family, all of us, we're going to pay that bill. It's ridiculous that they think we can just suck that up and that they don't need to be honest about it. Yet this week in the Senate, where I was, you had ministers spruiking cheapest, cleanest available form of energy, the renewable grid. Now, yeah, sure, I get the point. We don't have to pay for the sun to generate solar and wind to generate wind, but you've got to erect the infrastructure to generate, the panels and the windmills. Then you've got to have the infrastructure to get it to where you need it, and that comes at great cost as well. Hence this $500 billion additional on top of the 120, so over $600 billion in cost, which they've hidden from Australians. So they're not being honest about it. As you say, they point out that nuclear has a cost attached, but they won't be honest about their own costings, which is just duplicitous.
Jono, I don't know why, but I was listening to ABC News Radio this morning. I heard a story about how the New South Wales wheat crop is record yield and they're getting huge amounts of money for the quality of the wheat. I did a road trip between Melbourne and Adelaide and back last week through the Wimmera, Horsham, all the silos full. There was wheat everywhere, trucks everywhere. Must be global warming or climate change, mate.
Well, maybe there's a benefit to these sorts of things. I mean, if you do listen to the zealots out there, of course, and I even heard, I think Nick McKim refer to the planet being baked just this week in the Senate, the Green senator from Tasmania. I mean, this ridiculous alarmist language, as if we're not going to be able to grow our vegetables and crops to feed ourselves, that livestock are going to be sizzling in the paddocks. It's ridiculous. Yeah, it's a warm day today, but I'll tell you what, I think things seem to be going well. This pursuit of net zero blindly, not taking account of anything else, cost to the consumer, cost in terms of erecting transmission networks, etc., is bad policy making. Sure, we should do everything we can to minimise our impact on the environment. I've got no objection to that. But when it is not based in science or fact, and you don't take into account social and economic consequences of these decisions, you are a bad government, and that's what this government is.
Good to catch up with you. We'll talk to you again shortly.